Do you ever have a buyer come in that brings a non-local agent that you have to then work with a seller?
Yes, that happens a lot. And actually, with the interesting thing was with the market that we were just in, it became real prevalent, and the reason being is that it really didn't take any effort. I hate to say it about our industry, it just didn't. Um, there wasn't a real strategy when you were on the buyer side, and I, you saw a lot of agents patting themselves on the back, and my buyer won the property. It's like, yeah, but your buyer paid $50,000 over asking. You had nothing to do with that. It was the buyer did all the heavy lifting on that one. But in that market, it really didn't take a lot. That you could literally just send in an offer for a property if the buyer knew what it looked like, or run them down one time. And as long as you had the highest bid, there wasn't a whole lot of effort. People were buying property as is, where is. It wasn't, the dynamic wasn't as challenging. Now the situation's changing where there's not as much inventory. So now all of a sudden you bring someone down and look at one property and they're like, yeah, I'm going to wait because the interest rates are higher, right? So before you had low interest rates, people were just fighting over properties. It was just grab it and go. I'm going to get equity and I get a low rate. Now all of a sudden they're paying a higher interest rate. Prices are elevated and there's one or two properties in the style that they're looking for. If they don't want to buy that one right away, now all of a sudden you have to come back down again. Time is money. And now all of a sudden you're making that trek down from wherever you're from that's not in this area. Now that's taking time out of your day and working with a client that's in an area that you don't really know. And now all of a sudden you could be up against a circumstance where this buyer is taking up a lot of your time. So that dynamic is changing slightly. For us as a team, we did have a fair amount of agent referrals from other cities this year, so that did increase this year for us. And we welcome that. I mean, we try to provide the best customer service for everybody, and that includes an agent that's going to provide referrals to us. We're going to give your clients the best possible care because that's a business that we can continue working with that agent and their clients. But we do have that a lot. It can be a little frustrating because when you're on the other side of that, if they do have the listing, sometimes it's frustrating because they don't know about the area. They don't know anything about the building. They don't know anything about the backstory. So you're trying to get information for your client and they have no clue. And you literally end up handling both sides of the transaction for them. Mm-hmm. And that's frustrating for our closing team.
Do you see and do you ever see like a buyer face some consequences because they chose to use someone non-local,
Sure.
like negative effects on them?
Well, there's a couple of different ways that does happen. And the most common one is when a buyer is using a non-local lender. That is always the biggest issue there. And generally what happens is if they're using a non-local lender, that can happen because they're using a non-local agent. And so that agent has the vendors that they work with. They're comfortable with them, but they don't know this area here, so they don't understand the dynamic of what a condo is here. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have duplexes and their first and second floors and they're considered a condo association. And a lot of the lenders don't understand it. They can't lend on it, or they're in multiple units in their condo and they don't understand. So now all of a sudden deals are getting blown up. They're not getting financed because of the fact that the lender doesn't understand it, and that lender's coming from an agent who doesn't realize that based upon the property that they're trying to either sell or purchase. Yeah.
So obviously you have a bias here, but if you were trying to give advice to someone who said, well, I'd love to use a local real estate agent, yep. I don't know who to use, or what indicators should I look for in local agents to know that it's someone I can trust?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different factors there. When it comes down to you want to look at the person's track record or a team's track record and looking what they do historically, transactionally, because that means there's a lot of trust there from other people within the community to represent them in their transaction. You can certainly look at the reviews. We have Google reviews, we have Zillow reviews. You can certainly take a look at the reviews for those past transactions on what people had to say about the transaction that they had. At the same time, interview the agents. Interview somebody. Make sure you're comfortable with them, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to know and trust the agent that you're working with. You may like them and you may know them, but you only know them from the standpoint of what has been marketed and what you have been able to read and find out about them online. So now you want to have that conversation where now you can really get to know them, and then that will build the trust ultimately for you to want to work with them.
So without naming anyone, what is like, have you ever seen people get mistreated by realtors just in general?
Yeah.
And what does that usually look like?
Yeah, generally, yes, I have seen it. And I've even heard about it. And generally, it comes from the client directly, that they're no longer working with that agent, or they're looking to sell, and they had a bad experience, so that they're interviewing me to find out, hey, listen, this was the experience that I have. I learned that they had a bad experience through a series of questions that I'm going to be asking them anyways. I don't really want to know the details of the experience. They generally will just share them with you. I just want to know what happened from the standpoint so that I can set expectations for what they're looking for from us. I don't want to make, obviously, the same mistakes if it was something that was avoidable. You can't deal with, I can't change other people's personalities. I can't, if someone's unethical, that's just how they work. But if somebody has certain expectations, and if I'm not going to meet them, and then they're going to have a negative review on me, I want to know that in advance, so that maybe we can decide just not to work together, and that's okay too. It just doesn't need to be a negative experience. But because we do see it, we do hear about these negative experiences, that unfortunately just is a bad light on the entire industry, really.